the honor to pass it off to leader Emily Virgin, who is going to kick the event off. Representative, the floor is all yours.
All right, thank you. I am so excited to be here with everyone this evening. As you heard, I am Leader Emily Virgin. I have the distinct honor of leading the Democrats in the Oklahoma House of Representatives. I first want to introduce and thank our incredible co-hosts for this event who put in a lot of work before this evening. First, we have Cliff and Leslie Hudson, Mike and Susan Turpin, Drew and Linda Edmondson, Stuart and Linda Price, Bert Holmes, and Tim Gilpin. We are so thankful for not only your work for this evening, but also for all of your support of Democrats in Oklahoma for the past several years. I also want to introduce, I think he's on the call, Governor Bill Anatubby of the Chickasaw Nation, who we all are huge fans of. A lot of us consider him to be our governor. And he also got some good news today that I think we all were appreciative of as well out of the federal court. We also, I think, have candidate Abby Broyles, who is running a fantastic campaign statewide against someone who I know we all would like to get rid of, one of the biggest offenders in the US Senate, Jim Inhofe. So thank you, Abby, for what you're doing and for the incredible campaign that you're mounting. I know that we also have several members of the House and Senate caucuses from Oklahoma. I want to thank them for being here as well. Even at this unprecedented time in our country, I am excited about the momentum that we're seeing here in Oklahoma. Less than a month ago, after 10 years of legislative inaction by Republican supermajorities in the House and Senate, the voters of Oklahoma took matters into their own hands and approved Medicaid expansion. We'll now be heading into a legislative session next February to decide how to fund that program. And it's my hope that we will be doing so under the leadership of the administration of President Joe Biden. We have momentum in Oklahoma in urban and suburban areas. In 2018, we saw 4 state house seats and 2 state Senate seats flip from red to blue, all in suburban Oklahoma. We have the most talented House and Senate caucuses that I've seen in my 10 years of service. And I couldn't be more thrilled at the prospect of finishing out my last 2 years after legislative gains in the State House, in the State Senate, at the federal level, and ending my tenure in the Oklahoma House under President Joe Biden. I know you're all excited about that prospect as well. And now I want to introduce our very special guests. We're so excited to have them with us. The first is Mayor Pete Buttigieg. The 38-year-old former mayor of South Bend, Indiana, Pete was a leading candidate in the Democratic presidential primary and is now a top surrogate for Vice President Biden's presidential campaign. Mayor Pete considers himself to be a member of the school shooting generation and uses his age to talk about the effects of climate change. Mayor Pete was the first openly gay candidate to run for president. He is also a Rhodes Scholar and a former intelligence officer for the Navy Reserve, a position that sent him to Afghanistan for 7 months. Pete came in first in the state delegate equivalent count in Iowa, then placed second in New Hampshire and third in Nevada. He dropped out of the race and endorsed Vice President Biden before the South Carolina primary. Our second very special guest is Kelli O'Hara. She is an actress and singer, an Oklahoman, and is most known for her work on the Broadway and opera stages. A 7-time Tony Award nominee, Kelli won the 2015 Tony Award for Best Actress in a Musical for her performance as Anna Leonowens in the Lincoln Center theater revival of The King and I. She also received Tony nominations for her performances in The Light and Piazza, The Pajama Game, South Pacific, Nice Work If You Can Get It, The Bridges of Madison County, and Kiss Me Kate. Kelli also received a 2019 Olivier Award nomination for her performance in the West End revival of The King and I. We will now move into a very special discussion with Mayor Pete and Kelli. Our first question is for Mayor Pete. Mayor, you've obviously had experience governing in a progressive part of a red state, something that we know very well in Oklahoma. How did you work to affect progressive change with your power as mayor? And what can folks in Oklahoma take from your experience?
Okay, how about now? Sorry about that. As a fellow red state Democrat, I appreciate the question, and I appreciate the chance to be with you. I first just want to thank Mike and Susan and all of the hosts for making this event come together so well. And I'm really honored, and I know Chasten will be very jealous that I have the chance to appear with Kelli O'Hara too, who is so true to her Oklahoma roots and yet such a star on the stage, and just so glad that she's lending her talents to change. And I want to congratulate you, leader, and your fellow Democrats on the work that you're doing, especially when it can be uphill. And just want to make sure you all know this Medicaid expansion in Oklahoma, that drew attention from around the country. I think it deserves even more attention. It proves that people everyday voters are much more connected to the right answers on what has to happen than a lot of times their politicians are. And to me, that's the answer to the question that you raised. You know, time and time again, we're seeing that you can trick people or lie to people about a lot of things, but you can't trick somebody about how their own life is going. And whether we're talking about healthcare, whether we're talking about the economy, certainly when we're talking about issues related to the pandemic or so many others, people understand what's at stake in their everyday lives. What I found even here in bright red Indiana is that it is absolutely possible, without sacrificing our values or watering down our beliefs, to connect with people who maybe in the past have been in the habit of voting more conservative, especially at a time like this, when we can connect around values that are not necessarily conservative or liberal values, they're American values. But sometimes they've been talked about like they only belonged on one side of the aisle. This is a big theme of our presidential campaign, and I think it's really important for us to bear in mind now. You know, some people voted Republican because they think that's what you're supposed to do if you believe in family. But now, with what's being done to families economically, what's been done to families at the border, and with the importance of making sure families like mine have a place in the future, I think it's clear what it means to right now to make policy choices that are right for families. Some people voted Republican in the past because they thought that was what you're supposed to do when you care about national security. But a moment like this, where our national security is threatened by climate change and cyber attacks and global security risks like a pandemic, and where America is losing the honor that we used to hold in the eyes of the world, and even in the eyes of our closest allies, it's clear that we need a change in order to be more secure. Many, I think, were in the habit of voting Republican because they thought that's what you're supposed to do when you care about freedom and liberty. And yet, as we look around us, we see how freedom has been withheld from so many people, even just the basic freedoms that come from being paid enough to live on, or having access to healthcare, or any of those things that really decide whether, as you go about your day-to-day life, you're free to live a life of your choosing. And I found that that values-based vocabulary makes it possible to build bridges in even the most conservative parts of the country. One of our specialties, part of how we succeeded in Iowa, was in counties that had voted for Donald Trump, but before that had voted for Barack Obama. And I think in my entire lifetime, there has never been this good of a chance to realign some of those political boundaries that have been dug in almost a tribal way over the years, because so many things are so different now, because you have a president who's offending conservative values just as often as he offends liberal values. And because the other party isn't quite sure what to do with itself. All the more reason for us to leave no vote on the table, to reach out to absolutely everybody. And it's one reason why I'm proud to be supporting Oklahoma Democrats, and glad to see Oklahoma Democrats supporting Joe Biden. Yet nowhere is it written in stone that any place is a permanently red state or district or county or precinct. I know that I'm preaching to the choir on that because you're here, but I hope that we continue reinforcing each other in that work, because I think the map could look completely different in the years to come.
Well, we certainly hope so, Mayor Pete. Thank you so much for that. And you are exactly right. There are so many values that we have as Oklahoma Democrats that do represent rural Oklahomans. And it's just getting out there and having those conversations with folks to let them know that we are fighting for them. Kelli, you are a Tony Award winner and a 7-time Tony nominee and celebrated actress. You could easily move on from your home state of Oklahoma. What keeps you coming back and connected with Oklahoma, and why is it important for you to stay involved?
Well, I thank you for the question. First of all, let me just say, Mayor Buttigieg, the way you speak, the inspirational way you speak, because it's filled with so much honesty, is exactly what I think all of us, again, preaching to the choir, have been dreaming about, have been hoping for. And this decency, this honesty is what we have in Joe Biden as well. And the reason why I don't just leave my state behind is not only because of my parents living there, my siblings, my nieces and nephews, my best friends' children growing up in that educational system. I also see it as and know it as the place that made me the person I am, that gave me that sense of decency or morality, that taught me the hard work that I think has helped me succeed to whatever level that is. There is no leaving behind your home, your roots. I think about Oklahoma all the time, and where it can get, heat for being this completely red state. Here you have all these supporters of a Joe Biden presidency, these Democrats here tonight, ready to make change, ready for better education in the state, ready to not say, if you do move away, that you come from the state that is 50th for education in the country or first for incarceration in the country. I'm proud of how I grew up. I want people to know why. I want people to put that label on the state. Those people who are, like you said, leader, protecting the people in the rural counties as well. I grew up in Elk City, Oklahoma, on a farm. I felt like when I was growing up that it was a different sort of those generalities that we're giving it right now, or at least the rest of the country are giving it. I felt like that's not how I grew up. I grew up wanting equality. I grew up wanting fair treatment for everyone, education for everyone. Human decency, morality. I grew up with all of those things. That's why I'm who I am, from Oklahoma. So that's why I'll never leave it behind. And that's why I want to keep fighting against that sort of idea that that's what Oklahoma is about now. I won't accept it.
Well, we certainly appreciate you staying engaged here. And I think this group, we can say that we won't be leaving it behind either. And one of the reasons is because I think we're seeing such a lack of leadership at the top. And Mayor Pete, I know that you see that with President Trump's inability to lead. And we see Republican governors across the country who refuse to do what is best for their citizens. But Oklahoma and other red states are seeing exciting progressive change in urban and suburban areas, and that change has been activated locally. With that being said, why is it important for folks in red states to pay attention to national politics? We can often feel in states like Oklahoma that it's not important to us, but tell us why we should stay involved and plugged in.
Well, as a mayor, of course, I believe that salvation often comes from the local in our politics. And I'm thrilled to see how even in the reddest of states, communities are finding a way forward and often making those progressive changes that seem to be so gummed up in Washington right now. Not to mention a president pushing us in the wrong direction. One of the reasons I wound up running for national office after really enjoying my comparatively nonpartisan existence as a mayor was that I realized that it would not be possible to see the kind of future that my community needed unless things changed in Washington. Seeing the way that everything since the pandemic erupted has developed has only increased the pressure that's on local communities. Right now, things that represent simple common sense. The idea we need funding for more testing for COVID has come to be viewed as a Democratic priority in Washington rather than just a thing we all need to do. And on issue after issue, especially when it comes to making it possible for local communities to have the resources they need, it's getting harder and harder. And we're just not going to make it in any of our communities if we don't make it as a country. I also think a lot of areas that are rural are seeing just how much they have at stake, whether it's an issue like climate change, which has added a level of uncertainty to the lives and the businesses of farmers who are already really largely in the business of managing uncertainty for a living to begin with, to the extent to which foreign policy decisions, trade wars, and even security threats are affecting us closer to home. Whether it's the fact that communities like Oklahoma or Indiana are disproportionately likely to send up the troops who will be called up when the nation is under attack or under threat, or some of these issues affecting our low-income communities that are at stake, again, in how the U.S. performs on the world stage, and whether we have sensible arrangements with other countries when it comes to trade. At the end of the day, I believe all politics is deeply personal. I think about my marriage. I think about my health insurance. I think about my block that I live on and my neighbors here in South Bend. Those are some of the things that make it personal for me in different ways and for different people. Even the most arcane decision that gets made in national politics is exquisitely personal and sometimes comes down upon our lives with dangerous force and effect. And so we all have much more at stake than I think we're sometimes led to believe. We can't go on with Washington politics just being seen as a show, because if it's just a show, then I'd want to turn it off too. But the reality is that this is something that affects us in so many ways. And as you know, in your leadership at the state level, in our American system, a lot of the power sits at the state and local level. But more of the support needs to come from Washington in order to make it possible for us to do our jobs.
Yeah, you're so right that this pandemic, I think, has really brought to light how important the federal government can be in times like this, and just how much of a disaster it can be when we don't get that support from our federal governments. Our schools are scrambling right now to figure things out because they have no leadership from the top, which is so unfortunate, and I know what we're all working to change. Kelli, Mayor Buttigieg has talked about how he was able to make a difference as mayor. Obviously, your Tony Award doesn't give you the power to assign legislation, but how do you try to best make an impact in your career?
Well, I'll tell you, never have my credits seemed so unimportant as they do tonight. I mean, I'm proud of all of them, but no, this does not give me the right to speak on policy, public policy in any way. But I do represent the human side. I represent a born and raised Oklahoma girl who's out there just trying to make it, and who has also moved away and learned a lot about how other parts of the country work and think. But I think being from Oklahoma gives me a little bit of a leg up in understanding the divide in some ways, not always condoning it, but understanding it better. And I think that in years past, where I might have felt like more of a person who is trying to keep the peace, using my art to bring joy, when the peace ceases to exist because of leadership from the top that is not anything I ever imagined for myself or for my family or for this country, the not rocking the boat thing isn't working anymore. And if I have a platform at all to use my voice in any way to reach anybody, then I think I have the responsibility to do it, especially in this pandemic. Well, the last 4 years really, but especially during this pandemic of racial injustice and just, again, I go back to human decency. I want to speak out. I want to try to see if we can creak open doors that have been closed between us. There is such a huge divide in our country in a way that I feel is based so much on this idea, for me at least, it feels like there is no truth anymore. It's one of the things I said in the very beginning. Mayor Buttigieg just talks with truth, with honesty about things. I think Joe Biden, I thought to myself, what would if I opened up his pages of any sort, his social media or anything, I think I know what he's going to talk about, because I think it's going to be the truth. I think I know where he'll stand because he'll stand by the truth, good or bad. And I think he has actually said, you know, here I am up in the Northeast with Governor Cuomo having a horrible situation on his hands, which unfortunately now so much of the rest of the country is having. And I'm not sure they had to, but he was just saying it like it was. And as hard as it was to hear, when the hospitals were overflowing and the people were dying, at least we were hearing the truth. And if there was a problem that wasn't easily solved, he told us. He told us this is a problem. He told us this wasn't just fine. He told us this is what needs to be done. And that is the truth, I think, as they say, will set us free. And I think that is what I'm looking for in a leader, is just someone who will give it to us straight and trust us to be big enough to be able to handle it and do something about it.
Well, Kelli, I think that it is more important than ever that people like you use their platform, because they get tired of listening to politicians like me. And they, so, you know, artists like you and athletes who are using their platform now, people have invited you into their homes many times before, and they trust you. And so using your platform, I know we are all incredibly grateful that you're willing to do that.
Thank you.
We have a few questions from our audience. And so our first audience question is going to come from Jeff and Colleen Bell from Ada, Oklahoma.
Thank you so very much, Leader. And thank you, Mayor Pete and Ms. O'Hara. The question I have is, what are the national, state, and local initiatives to get out the vote for Vice President Biden, and how can we help with that effort?
Well, thank you, Jeff. I mean, it's really different this time around, getting out the vote. I think a lot of us who like to be involved are used to knocking on the door of a campaign headquarters, and you walk in and there's the smell of coffee, and you got the volunteer to your right and the volunteer to your left, and you buck each other up to hit the phones or go take a walk packet and go knock on doors. And it's different, but it's not 1,000% different. The bottom line is it's about reaching out to people, making sure they know why this election is so important, making sure they know how and where to vote. And in many ways, that's more important than ever, because how and where to vote is a little bit scrambled right now. You know, there's an election process set of things that need to happen, making sure as many people as possible get a chance to vote from home, making sure that there are safe ways to vote in person too, even just making sure there are enough poll workers out there, which I think is going to be a real issue, actually. And when polling centers are closed, it often is something that disadvantages low income, Native and Black voters in particular. And so it's not a very sexy thing, but just becoming a poll worker for my generation and younger generations, I think is a really important step. So there's all these process things that have to happen. But then as a campaign, I know the Biden campaign is working very hard with a state-by-state plan to make sure that we are doing everything we can to motivate and energize and inform voters who need to know their polling place, they need to know their rights, they need to know their options, and they need to know why this is the election of a lifetime. And that means reaching people where they are. Everybody from young voters who have so much at stake in the climate decisions that are about to be made, to parents who have so much at stake in the education decisions that are being made, to communities that really will see their fate unfold based on the election that's about to happen. Of course, the other thing that's so important to get out the vote are these local races that sometimes feel so much closer to home than a presidential does. And that's where I think you all are in a position to help motivate people and look for different strategies. I've done Canvas kickoffs through Zoom in New Hampshire. It's not how I'm used to doing field, but the point is there's got to be a way, and there is, and we keep finding ways to do that. So I would definitely encourage you to be on the lookout for those calls to action from your local party. Think about maybe some different ways from being involved in what you're used to. And more than anything else, making sure that everyone is teaming up for that support, that we're one party going into the fall. And of course, the financial resources that you all are generously contributing right now is a big part of what makes that possible too.
Thanks, Jeff, and thank you, Mayor Pete. We are now going to go to Lisa Pryor from Norman, Oklahoma for our second question.
Kelli, you studied performance in vocal performance in college, and have often spoken about how important your voice teacher, Florence Birdwell, was to your career on Broadway. In recent years, federal and state funding for arts education has steadily decreased. Can you talk about how arts education was crucial to your career development, and why is it important that all children, regardless of socioeconomic status or school district, have access to music and other forms of arts education in school?
Great question. Thank you very much. And it is something I'm very passionate about. You know, I can argue why arts are important to me. It's my chosen field. It is my passion. And I had wonderful opportunities in Oklahoma through my voice teacher, Florence Birdwell, my high school teacher, Dixie Lee Jordan. These things changed my life, but I think of it in a broader way, not just if you're going to go make it your living or your life if you're lucky enough, but how it creates communication, and especially those types of children who are sort of need an outlet that they don't have at home or with their peers or with their family. There's an outlet for that communication allows them to sort of put whatever they're handling in their lives through something else to cause growth, to cause change, to cause possibility and opportunity in their lives. And we do see a lot of underserved communities. We see a lot of those kids. You know, it's not just sports. There's a lot of artists who come out of those wonderful opportunities through art, who make something of themselves. And also, it's a form of therapy of any sort of life to be able to communicate about it in any way, any art form. I also think that scientists and mathematicians are beautifully interconnected with the arts. I mean, there was a wonderful New York Times article several years back about some of our greatest mathematicians and scientists being, you know, virtuosic violinists and cellists, and how there's a very direct connection to the way the brain works. So it's logistically and smart, but it's also an emotional smart, that we talk about things, that we communicate through what we see. Arts have been one of the biggest political forms of communication since the beginning of time, since the Greeks. This is how we talked about what was going on in our communities out in front of people. This is how we emoted that. This is how we affected change. So in a state like Oklahoma, there are kids like me, a lot of us out there that want a way to let go of some things, to communicate some things that we might otherwise not be able to. And it does make a community stronger to come together that way. Right now, we're feeling the loss during this pandemic of being able to gather. But what do we gather for? Sports and arts. So there's been a big frustration to me why the arts aren't equally as adored as the sports. So I think it's very important. And I love sports, so.
I was gonna say, you're with a group of people who are hoping that we get to have college football this season, but looking more and more unlikely. Right. But thank you, Kelli, and you're exactly right. The arts seem, especially public arts, seem more important than ever. Our third question is going to come from Joshua Harris Till, who is the president of the Young Democrats of America.
Thank you so much, Leader Virgin. I always tell the joke that I got the chance to meet Pete when I was having that convention, but when Chasten came to Oklahoma, we got to have lunch together. And that is not only such an impactful moment for me, but definitely the most viral tweet I've ever put out was a picture we put together. I want to ask the question, obviously, being the president of Young Democrats, my focus is always on youth. So many campaigns and candidates are talking at young people instead of to young people. What is the plan that Joe Biden has for youth outreach in terms of this election cycle, not just for his presidency, but in a bigger picture as a whole?
Well, first of all, Joshua, thanks for the work that you're doing to rally young people, because in many ways you are, and your work is the answer to that question. It can't all come from the top down, especially for young voters who, as you say, have not always felt heard in the political process. You know, one thing that I've seen with the vice president, he is very sincerely committed to this idea of being a transitional or transformational figure. He said it to me in private the same way that he said it in public. And I don't think for him that only means, making sure that when it comes to appointments and officials in the administration, that there are younger generations there, but also to build a presidency that's going to empower and hear and amplify those voices. Now, the other side of the coin is there's a lot of self-organizing that has to go on. Again, it shouldn't all come from the kind of the mothership, right? And so one of the things that I was pleased to see them take up that was an innovation that I thought served our campaign very well was ideas like having digital captains, people who became fired up about a campaign or an issue on their own, and then equipping them with the tools to connect up to the kind of official side, but to do it in their own voice and to do it with their own networks in their own way. And I think that style of communication is going to be really important for making sure that a younger generation feels itself heard and is authentically able to shape these conversations and decisions, as has to happen, because, as I always say, that the longer you're planning to be here, the more you have at stake in a whole set of decisions that are about to be made, some of them permanent when it comes to things like climate. And I think one of the reasons why there's a lot more cause for hope than usual in our moment is the activation of young people and the way that on everything from racial justice to climate action, we're seeing the sort of activism and activation that has always been what it takes to deliver change in this country. You don't think about this often when you think about the vice president, maybe because of his long career in public service, but one thing that he and I have in common is getting elected to office first at the age of 29. And I think he still is mindful of that importance of stepping forward and what it meant for a generation that first came to influence during another very chaotic and challenging time. And I know that will guide him in his work, not just in his campaign, but his presidency. And I'll make sure to tell Chasten you said hello.
I know Josh appreciates the likes and the retweets. So yeah, tell Chasten thanks. We now will go to Will Hoke from Oklahoma City for our next question for Pete.
Thank you for letting me ask some questions, and thanks, Mayor Pete, for being here, and Ms. O'Hara for being and putting this together, and Leader Virgin, I appreciate you and all that you do for all of these, for all the Oklahomans here in the state. And also thank you to the sponsors. My question is for Mayor Pete, and what I'm interested in is your wonderful work with Win the Era. Can you speak to how that is helping Joe Biden become our next president and also elect down ballot Democrats across the country in November, including Oklahoma?
Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm really excited about what we've been able to put together with Win the Era, which has mobilized our community of supporters and drawn in new supporters who may have been somewhere else in the primary last year, but are all on the same page now. We've got a political action committee backing specific candidates, and we've also got a 501c4 organization that's helping maintain a presence in areas around issues that I think are going to be more and more important. Some of those issues include democracy reform, making sure that the mechanics of our democracy are improved and are fairer. Another drawing on the Douglas Plan, which is our plan for Black America and engaging on dealing with systemic racism, is around the economic empowerment work that we spoke for in the campaign that I think we can contribute to now. Another is mental health. Probably the number one issue in terms of the gap between how often I heard about it from reporters, which wasn't very much, and how often I heard about it from voters, which was literally every place I went, and speaking to the importance of those issues. And other matters around climate, the opportunity for national service, areas where I feel like we can now be an ally to other organizations who are pursuing that work. And as you said, we've also got an opportunity to help in this election that's now less than 100 days away. Doing everything I can for the vice president, from events like this one we're doing together right now, to piping into local television. You just might see me on TV in Oklahoma one of these days, everywhere from there to print media, and sometimes just helping to rally and connect volunteers. And we're doing that kind of work for local candidates too. So if you go to wintheera.com, you can learn more about the different candidates that we're supporting. We've had a first wave of endorsements. We're always taking ideas for a next wave too, and I'd love to hear about some of the most compelling races shaping up in Oklahoma. And we try to be involved at every level, even though we can only be involved in a certain number of races. We're doing everything from candidacies that I think will help tilt the U.S. Senate back to Democrats' favor. We were just with Cal Cunningham earlier tonight in North Carolina, all the way through to folks like Jevin Hodge, who's running for county supervisor in Arizona. Not the most sexy office, but so critically important. And Jevin's an example of a new generation of Black leaders who I think will be making a difference for decades to come. So from U.S. Senate to county supervisor and everywhere in between, we cannot get caught ever treating the presidency like it's the only office that matters. And again, I know that I'm preaching to the choir on that, but it's so important because right now we're seeing on one hand, more than ever, how important these state and local decision makers are on everything from what's going on in Oklahoma, everything from pandemic resilience to racial justice and policing. And on the other hand, there's less and less attention available for those levels of government because our attention is so fixated on the drama of the Trump presidency and the national emergencies that we're living through. All the more reason I think we got to rally together in coordination with parties and with individual campaigns to help make sure that great candidates are able to compete. And nothing warms my heart more than seeing a successful, pioneering red state Democrat do well.
Well, we certainly share that excitement. And thanks for your work with Win the Era. Thanks, Will, for your question. We now will go to Sarah Jane Rose, who is the Executive Director of Sally's List and is from Oklahoma City, has a question for Kelli.
Hi, Kelli. Thanks for being with us tonight. We really appreciate it. How are you talking to your young kids right now about the current political climate, and how are you preparing them to be active participants in our society as members of the next generation?
You know, I'm treading carefully, but I am very honest. Again, I bring honesty and sort of trusting my children to be able to handle some things because I think it's very important that they're living in this moment. My younger one, who's only 6.5, is a little less of a recipient of all of this, going on. But my 11-year-old is like a sponge right now for everything happening. We sort of made the mistake 4 years ago of assuming that we wouldn't be in the position that we are now, and spoke about it so loudly that when Donald Trump took office, I think my son thought that the world was ending, and we were careful to not take him on that ride with us. However, I want them to be educated about what's happening, what is right, with the racial injustice that we've seen since George Floyd's death, and much beyond. I mean, before that. I've set them down to talk about what is happening in our country, what our country has been built on, as we go back and back and back in the years of our country, what it all looks like, but with the positive spin of this moment is creating a change that of the likes I've never seen, and that I believe that the change will be lasting. And as some people are saying, this is not a trend. I believe this is the moment that will not just go away. This is the moment that will stay. And especially if people start to use their voices in a different way, if those younger generation ears are open in a different way than say mine were when I was a child, where things weren't talked about as much. In a way, I felt like the naivete of my childhood brushed things under a little bit more, and maybe it wasn't as out in the open, but I think things have to blow up in order to be healed in a better way. And so my kids will and are being taken on that journey in the most loving and open and understanding way that I can do for them, because they deserve that. They deserve to be taught certain things that I was never taught. They deserve to not watch and hear everything, but also be educated so that they know what's happening in their world. And I trust that they can handle it. And we're a very careful family. We, as far as this pandemic is concerned, we wear our masks. We protect our grandparent who lives close by. We think about their grandparents that are on this call right now in Oklahoma. And they are I want them to be citizens of this country, active and passionate. And so I think the answer is honesty, but with the right kind of level for a child. But yes, honesty. There's no sugarcoating any of this right now. We're in a moment, and it will produce change, in my opinion.
Thanks, Kelly, and thanks, Sarah Jane. I know that a lot of us are feeling overwhelmed at this time and wondering what we can do. And so, Mayor Pete and Kelly, this question is for both of you. We will start with Mayor Pete. What keeps your spirits up and keeps you hopeful? Obviously, we're all fired up about Joe Biden, but are there any local candidates who also excite you?
Absolutely. Yeah, from candidates right here in Indiana to the folks that we're backing with Win the Era, that gives me a ton of hope. And whenever I feel the kind of pressure against my optimism, that's how I get it recharged. But it's not just people running for office. What's really inspiring about this moment, and as Kelly said, this could be a moment that really leads to change, is the activation of so many people in so many different ways. And I thought Kelly's description of going through that decision herself of how to take her voice and platform and citizenship to this level, knowing that there are some moments, even if you're not of the political space, moments that just compel you to take a side and take a stand. That is happening throughout so many different hearts and in so many different ways. The activation of young people, some of them not even old enough to vote, who are changing the answer by, I think, taking that step, that moral authority that the young people have when they look in the eyes of anybody in a position of power and say, what are you doing to keep me safe and to secure my future on issues of climate, on issues of gun safety, on issues of making sure that the future economy is one where they can thrive. Making sure that it's possible to actually have the future that we're talking about that's not theoretical for them. And seeing the way that they have stood up in so many ways, seeing the diversity of those who are standing alongside Black voices leading the movement for Black lives, remembering the diversity of those who helped bring about an extension of my rights that included not just people from within the LGBTQ community, but a lot of allies from outside of it. I believe more than ever that we could actually look back at 2020, as crazy and bleak as this year has been, and think of it as a turning point that ushered in a 2020s, a decade, a deciding decade that actually set this country on the right path for the balance of this century, for the rest of my lifetime. That gives me a ton of hope. Not because I'm naive about the situation we're in. This is rough. This is as rough as it's been for the prospects of our country in a very long time, but also the knowledge that in that comes a kind of urgency that has called so many people to be involved and to stand up for what's right, that I really think this could be an era-defining moment that we could in fact look back on with pride. And that means we got our work cut out for us over the next not quite 100 days. And I know that we'll be there to support each other and cheer each other on as we go.
Let me, don't have much more that I can top that. It makes so much sense, everything that you're saying. I do feel that the hope comes from this idea that this feeling that something is shifting in some of the negativity, while we hang on to the goodness that's always been there. My mom always said, people want to be they want to be good. And I've gone through a period, and I'll just admit this, gone through a period of thinking, wait, I thought you said people wanted to be good. And I feel like there are some choices and some behaviors that equal the exact opposite in our country. And this moment, I think this moment has been born out of people saying, enough of the negative. I want more of the good. I want more of the decency. I want better treatment for humanity. I want more equality. I don't want this happening to my brothers and sisters anymore. I don't want it happening to me or my children anymore. And I think that's a good thing. I think that's a wake-up call. That's when everything does crash open and you start the hard work of the building blocks going back in different and new ways, so they're stronger. My hope comes from my children, comes from the idea that that they must have a world to go into as adults where things are in a better place. That's why I'm so strongly for Joe Biden, so that we get back to that sort of leadership that leads us to the next leadership, that leads us to the next leadership that is the better one for us. I am also very hopeful, made hopeful by these conversations that are happening right now, which have been so beautiful. I don't know if you're all having them, but something really, really started happening in my community up here through social media and programs like Pass the Mic, where we were sharing, white women and Black women were sharing pages to talk about our experiences. And then people who might follow me, say from Oklahoma, might go onto my page and see the experiences of a woman of color. Those types of things just break open the door, and you see people for the individuals they are, and not seas of the same, you know, and separated. You see people for the malleable, different, special, individual people we are. I love those hard but really important conversations. And change to me is not scary. Change actually means something very positive if we go in the right direction. And we have this opportunity in 100 days to really start to go in the right direction. And so I'm feeling hopeful, as long as we get out there and vote, and as long as those votes count. So I'm really, really hopeful.
Thank you both. That was the perfect inspiring message that we needed. And Kelly, I don't know if you saw, but you even got an amen during your answer. So thank you everyone for participating in the Q&A, and to Mayor Pete and Kelly for such a great discussion. I know that everyone is really thankful for your time. And Kelly's grandparents, thanks for being here. And
my parents,
and
yeah.
your parents
my
are
kids'
here.
grandparents, but my parents, yes. And
Okay,
my brother
awesome.
and my sister.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So glad that we have your family with us tonight. We will go to some closing remarks, and Kelly, if you'll start us off, and then we'll go to Mayor Pete.
Sure. You know, I was having a conversation with my dad not too long ago about, you know, during all of the presidential race and who are you going to vote for? And when it came down to Biden, my dad asked me why I was decided on that. And it was because I think about this subject of decency that I've been talking about. And that can have many different meanings. But what I think of decency is this. I was reading something about this pandemic. What would have Biden done differently? Would he have said, we care about those of you who have lost people? Would he have said this daily? Yes, I believe this. Would he have reached out to people who have lost family members or people who have been struggling with this pandemic in a different way? The answer is yes. And the reason I know this is because I think my father-in-law, who lives up here in Connecticut near me, met Joe Biden once at a party somewhere on Long Island. And it was something, maybe one conversation. And several years later, maybe many years later, my mother-in-law passed away. And if that phone didn't ring the week she died, and a Joe Biden was on the other line just saying, I know how it feels to lose your wife, pal. And here's what I'm going to tell you. Here's a couple of things. And my father-in-law still talks about this conversation, you know, about how the sadness never ends, but the thoughts might come less often. You know, your children will be there to keep her living on. Things like that he still talks about. And they didn't know each other that well, but he did reach out and make a phone call. And it wasn't for press. Nobody knows about that phone call. It was just to be a decent person. And I know that's not what public policy is about. I know that's not what running a country is about. I could never speak on that as well as Mayor Pete could, just with that skill and that intelligence and that passion for all of what this law and this country stands on, the things that my father and my brother who are lawyers love, and all of those things. I can't speak on that, but I can speak about human decency and making the right choices for everyone, because we just want the best for every brother and sister in this country. And I believe that's what we have in Joe Biden. And so I'm very glad to be here speaking with such a wonderful man as Mayor Pete about this subject.
Well, I'm reluctant to add anything to that because it sums up the case so well. And again, I so admire the way that you speak to what's at stake in this moment. And I think that you're also really hitting on something that's so essential to what the presidency is about. Yes, we need dramatically different policies in terms of making sure we have a better economy and more racial justice and a climate future we can believe in and so many other things. Yes, we need better management and administration, somebody in that office who is capable of empowering public servants to do their job and keep us safe from everything from disease to foreign interference. More than anything, we just need somebody in the Oval Office who can call the country to its highest values. It is not a small thing. The United States be a good person who cares about others and who can voice with empathy the needs of the nation. Because at its best, that can bring better things out of us. I think the campaign is already bringing good things out of us, just as this presidency is often calling out to the worst in us. We've got a chance to make good on that opportunity. And that, I think, is the real stuff of leadership. And all of us have a chance to make that known to those in our lives, especially those on the fence who may not be interested in party loyalty one way or the other, may not even be terribly interested in what sound like distant policy decisions made in big white buildings in Washington, but who understand the importance of leadership that calls out to what is best and acts in the name of what is right. That's the chance in front of us. It's why I think our messages about belonging and the future of this country rhyme so well with the message that Joe Biden launched his campaign with from the very first day. The idea that this is an election that will settle questions about the soul of our nation. That really is where we are. And I very much hope that I'll be in a position to be speaking with you with satisfaction about the fruit of all of our efforts when we come to November and then take the steps that need to happen afterwards to bring this country together and to move it forward. And I'm so honored to have been able to be in such great company tonight. And I am very much looking forward to doing this in person one day, as soon as we can do it safely.